My son called me another mouth to feed, in the house I largely paid for. He made me a mail clerk in the company I secretly built, ashamed to admit I was his father. He thought he had broken the old man. He was about to learn that foundations run deep, and I knew exactly where the cracks were. If this story finds you, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. My name is Arthur Thompson, and this is the story of how I lost my son, only to find myself. The champagne was flat. The cake tasted like sugary cardboard. That's what I remember most about my retirement party. 40 years I'd given to the city planning department. 40 years of zoning laws, infrastructure maps, and knowing where every pipe, every power line, and every foundational secret in this city was buried. I held the city's blueprints in my head. The party was in the drab government break room. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. My colleagues smiled, but their eyes were tired. We were the invisible engine of the city. Good people, hard-working people. But the celebration felt hollow. It felt like the end. My son Kevin stood near the back, tapping impatiently on his phone. His wife Sarah clung to his arm. Her expression was a mask of polite boredom. They were dressed for a charity gala, not a farewell for a mid-level clerk. They always seemed to be dressed for somewhere else, somewhere more important. "Speech, Arthur," someone called out. I shuffled forward. I clutched the engraved clock they gave me. A lifetime of service measured in ticking hands. I mumbled a few words of thanks. My voice sounded strange, hesitant. Kevin offered a weak, distracted clap. He looked stressed. He always looked stressed. He was a junior executive at Apex Innovations, a massive tech firm downtown. Ambition, I was learning, didn't bring peace. It brought hunger, a constant gnawing hunger, and I didn't realize that hunger was about to consume me. A few weeks later, retirement settled in like a cold, heavy fog. My pension was decent, enough for a modest life. I didn't need much, but the emptiness of the house was unbearable. It was the home my wife Mary and I shared for 30 years. Every room echoed with her laughter. Since she passed 2 years ago, the silence had become too loud, too suffocating. I couldn't stay there, drowning in the past. So I sold the house. The money from the sale, a significant sum, mostly went to Kevin. He needed help with the down payment on his new house in the suburbs. It was a stark structure of glass and steel, more like a museum than a home. Beautiful, but cold. And then there were the credit cards he'd maxed out, the expensive cars, the designer clothes, the lavish vacations, all trying to keep up with an image, a mountain of debt. He told me it was essential for his career. I believed him. I didn't mind giving him the money. He was my son, my only child. I moved into their guest room. I expected quiet evenings, time to work on my model trains, a chance to reconnect with my boy. I was wrong. The quiet never came. The house was a whirlwind of anxiety. Money, status, appearances. Kevin was climbing the ladder at Apex, but the higher he climbed, the colder he became. He was turning into the glass and steel of his house. The first few months were polite. Forced smiles, strained conversations. I tried to make myself useful. I tended the garden. Mary loved the roses. I knew how to care for them. I was pruning the bushes one sunny afternoon. The smell of the earth grounding me. Sarah came out onto the patio, holding a glass of iced water. She stared at the clippings. "Arthur, what are you doing?" Her voice was sharp. "Pruning the roses, Sarah. It helps them grow." "You're cutting too much. It looks severe." She shook her head, her expensive sunglasses hiding her eyes. "We have a landscaper for this." "Please, just don't touch them again." Severe. The word hung in the air. I put down the shears. My hands trembled slightly. I was a disruption, a smudge on their pristine glass walls. Then it was the dishwasher. I was loading the breakfast dishes. Kevin walked into the kitchen, grabbed a coffee cup and sighed loudly. "Dad, this isn't how we do it. I'm just loading the dishes, Kevin. It's inefficient. The plates go here. The bowls go there. There's a system." He started rearranging everything I had done. His movements sharp, aggressive, inefficient. I was 65 years old. I knew how to load a dishwasher, but in their house I was a child, or worse, an unwelcome guest. The tension grew. They talked about money constantly. Hushed, urgent voices, late at night. The country club membership, the new luxury car they were leasing. They acted like they were drowning while living in the lifeboat, Idea, and they started looking at me like I was the one pulling them under. One evening, about 3 months after I moved in, we were sitting at their expensive glass dinner table. The food was minimalist. Small portions on large plates. Sarah was complaining about a vacation to Italy. It's essential for networking, Kevin, she insisted, swirling the wine in her glass. The crystal caught the light. Everyone in your circle goes. We can't afford to look like we're struggling. Kevin slammed his fork down. The sound echoed in the cavernous dining room. The violence of the gesture startled me. We just can't afford everything, Sarah. Not right now, he glared at her. Then he turned to me. His expression hardened. It was a look I'd never seen before. Cold, calculating. The look of a landlord assessing a delinquent tenant. Dad, he started. His voice tight, devoid of warmth. We have to talk about your contribution. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. The formality felt wrong, unnatural. Contribution? I gave you the money from the house, Kevin. Almost everything I had. That's gone, Dad. He waved his hand dismissively. Invested. Tied up in the property. I'm talking about now. The groceries. The utilities. The increased taxes. It all adds up. He leaned forward, lowering his voice, as if sharing a difficult truth. Look, Dad, I know you just retired, but Sarah and I are trying to build a future here. We have expenses you can't even imagine. He took a deep breath. He delivered the final blow with ruthless efficiency. Frankly, we don't need another mouth to feed, not one that isn't bringing anything in. The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the breath from my lungs. Another mouth to feed. I wasn't his father. I was a burden, a liability on his balance sheet. A bad investment. The silence stretched out, heavy, suffocating. I looked at Sarah. She was intently studying her nails. Her silence was an endorsement of his cruelty. I thought of Mary. The years I worked overtime, the sacrifices we made so Kevin would never know want, so he could have the future we dreamed of for him. And now, that future had no place for me. I understand, I said. My voice trembled. The humiliation burned in my throat. Good, Kevin said. Visibly relieved I wasn't making a scene. The tension left his shoulders. The problem was solved. So, I did something about it. I pulled some strings at Apex. I looked up confused, dread mixing with the shame. Strings? I got you a job. It's in the mailroom, he said it casually. Simple stuff. Sorting letters, delivering packages. It pays okay. It'll cover your share of the expenses. He smiled. A cold transactional smile, and it will give you something to do during the day, keep you active. A job? I had just ended a 40-year career. My son decided I needed something to do. He wanted his father, a man who managed multi-million-dollar city infrastructure projects, to sort mail in the basement of his office building. The absurdity was almost laughable, if it didn't hurt so much. But beneath the hurt, something else stirred. Something old. Apex Innovations. The name tickled the back of my memory. A distant echo from a life I had almost forgotten. A secret I had kept buried for decades. I looked at my son, this stranger, with my eyes. His mother's ambition, twisted into something unrecognizable. I wanted to see how far this would go. I wanted to understand the depth of his betrayal. I forced a smile onto my face. It felt brittle. It's very thoughtful, Kevin, I said. The words tasted like ash. I agree. Kevin smiled. A genuine smile this time. The relief was palpable. Great. You start Monday. He thought he had won. He had no idea what he had just started. Monday morning was cold and gray. A biting wind whipped through the city streets. Kevin was already in his expensive wool coat, checking his watch impatiently. I fumbled with the buttons on my old jacket. It felt too thin against the cold. Hurry up, Dad. I have an early meeting. I can't be late. The drive downtown was silent. The tension in the car was thick. He didn't ask how I felt. He didn't offer to any encouragement. He just drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. When we reached the towering glass structure of Apex Innovations, he didn't pull into the executive parking garage. He stopped abruptly at the curb, near the service entrance, the area for deliveries and trash pickup. This was intentional, the deliberate humiliation. "They'll buzz you in here," he said. He didn't make eye contact, his eyes fixed on the traffic ahead. "Go to HR. Ask for Jessica. She'll get you set up. They'll give you a uniform." "All right," I said. I opened the door. The cold air rushed into the warm car, a stark reminder of the reality I was stepping into. "And Dad?" I turned back, hoping for a flicker of kindness. A moment of connection, a shred of the son I used to know. His eyes were cold, hard. "Try not to embarrass me. Don't go around telling everyone you're my father. It's better if we keep things separate. Professional. Professional." The words stung more than the cold wind. I stood on the sidewalk and watched him drive away, his expensive car disappearing into the traffic, the red taillights blurring in the morning mist. I felt incredibly small, standing in the shadow of that massive tower, a building that represented everything I had lost, everything I had given away. I took a deep breath and walked to the service entrance. The door buzzed open, heavy and metallic. It felt like walking into a cage. The mailroom was in the basement, a stark contrast to the gleaming lobby upstairs. It was a windowless room. Harsh, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The concrete floor was stained. The air smelled like dust, stale coffee, and old paper. It was noisy. Sorting machines whirred. Carts rattled. People shouted over the din. Organized chaos. Jessica, the HR manager, was brisk and efficient. She had sharp eyes and clicked her pen constantly. She handed me a temporary ID badge. Arthur, a gray uniform, stiff and scratchy. She handed me off to the mailroom supervisor, a perpetually stressed man named Mike. His face was etched with exhaustion. "Kevin Thompson's referral, right?" Mike asked, barely looking up from his clipboard. "Yes," I said. "Right. Grab a cart. We're backed up." The work was mindless, but physically demanding. My back ached. My knees protested. My feet throbbed by the end of the day. I pushed a heavy cart through the labyrinthine hallways, delivering packages, bundles of mail, tracing the arteries of the corporate body. I became invisible, a gray-haired man in a gray uniform, just another piece of office equipment. Easily replaceable, unremarkable. The employees, focused on their screens, their ambitions, walked past me as if I were a ghost. The younger employees in the mailroom treated me with pity. Condescension. A young man named Mark, ambitious and arrogant, seemed to enjoy it the most. He reminded me of Kevin. One afternoon, I struggled with a heavy box of printer paper. My back twinged. "Careful with that, Grandpa," Mark said, walking past me. He didn't offer to help. "Don't want you to break a hip. We're already short-staffed." "Grandpa," the word hit me harder than the heavy box. I just nodded, kept moving. The humiliation was a bitter pill I forced myself to swallow. I focused on the work, determined to do it well, not for Kevin, not for Apex, but for my own pride. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I started paying attention to the building itself, the structure, the infrastructure. I found an access panel in the basement hallway. I opened it, tracing the wires, the pipes, reconnecting with the blueprints in my head. That's when I met Samuel, the night janitor. He was an older man, quiet, observant. He pushed his cleaning cart with the same slow deliberation I pushed my mail cart. He saw me looking at the access panel. He didn't seem surprised. "You look at this building different than the others, Mr. Thompson," Samuel said. His voice was raspy. "I used to be a city planner," I explained, closing the panel. "I know," Samuel said. He smiled, slow, knowing smile. "You look at it like you know where the bones are buried." He pushed his cart away, leaving me with the feeling that I wasn't as invisible as I thought. A few days later, I was making a delivery on the 12th floor, the executive suite, Kevin's floor. The atmosphere up there was different. Quiet, hushed. The carpets were thicker. The air smelled of expensive cologne and leather. I saw him down the hall, talking to a well-dressed woman, an executive assistant. Susan. He was laughing, loud, forced. It grated on my nerves. I paused, waiting for a moment to catch his eye. Maybe just a hello, a small acknowledgement. Suddenly, Kevin was marching toward me, his face red with anger. The laughter died on his lips, replaced by a mask of fury. He saw me, and he hated what he saw. He grabbed my arm, roughly, pulled me into an empty alcove, away from curious eyes. His grip was tight, painful. "What are you doing?" he hissed, his voice low and furious. "I was just delivering the mail, Kevin," I said, startled by his aggression. The bundle of envelopes trembled in my hand. "You were loitering. You were staring at Susan." "I wasn't staring. I was waiting. Don't interrupt me," he snapped. He tightened his grip on my arm. "You are here to deliver mail, not to socialize with executive staff. Do you understand how this looks? Do you understand the hierarchy?" He leaned closer, his breath hot on my face. "You are mailroom staff. Act like it. Don't make me regret getting you this job." He straightened his tie, glanced around to make sure no one had witnessed the exchange, and walked away. Without another word, he left me standing there, the sting of his words echoing in the silence, the imprint of his fingers burning on my arm. My own son was ashamed of me. The realization settled deep in my chest, heavy and cold. It wasn't just about the money. It was about his image, his desperate need to erase his humble origins, and I was the reminder that he couldn't. I kept my head down after that. I learned the routines, the shortcuts, the rhythms of the building. I focused on the work, and I started to watch closely. The next day was payday, my first paycheck. Barely above minimum wage, but it was mine. I cashed it during my lunch break. When I got home that evening, Sarah was waiting by the door, arms crossed, impatient. The smell of expensive perfume hung heavy in the air. "Did you get paid?" she asked immediately. No greeting, no pretense. "Yes, I did." "Good. Hand it over." I paused, confused by the bluntness of the demand. "Excuse me?" "Kevin said you're covering the utilities and groceries this month." "I need the cash." She tapped her foot impatiently. "I had to charge a dress for the company gala this weekend. We're over budget. We need to maintain appearances." She held out her hand, expectantly, palm up, as if demanding tribute. I looked at her, this woman who lived in a house I largely paid for, demanding my meager earnings, treating me like a servant in her own home. The depth of their entitlement was staggering, paralyzing. I handed her the cash, all of it, leaving myself with barely $20 to last for the next 2 weeks. She didn't even say thank you. She just took the money and walked away. The sound of her heels clicking on the marble floor echoed in the empty hallway. I was truly alone, and I was starting to realize just how deep their betrayal went. As I moved through the building, invisible and ignored, I observed the ecosystem of Apex Innovations. It was bloated, inefficient, driven by ego and fear. And I observed Kevin. I saw the fear behind his eyes, the insecurity lurking beneath the surface. I saw the way he treated his subordinates, dismissive, arrogant. The pressure in the office was mounting. Apex was working on a massive project. The Smart City proposal, integrating their technology into the city's infrastructure. A multi-million-dollar contract. A game changer. And Kevin was leading the charge. It was my specialty. My world. The world I had spent 40 years mastering. I saw Kevin berating a young architect one afternoon, through the glass wall of a conference room. The architect's name was David Chen, a talented kid. I had seen his designs delivered to the executive floor. They were innovative, elegant. "This is Echotube, David," Kevin shouted, his voice muffled through the glass. "I need brilliance, not mediocrity. Redo it." By tomorrow morning, David just stood there, taking it. His shoulders slumped. Later that day, I was delivering mail to Kevin's office. He wasn't there, but his presentation was open on his screen. The Smart City proposal. I recognized the designs. They were David Chan's, but Kevin's name was on them. He was stealing credit for David's work, and he was doing it badly. He'd missed the crucial details. The infrastructure integration was all wrong. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Kevin wasn't just ambitious. He was incompetent and dishonest. I ran into an old colleague from the city planning department a few days later, Tom O'Malley. We grabbed a coffee in the lobby. "Arthur, good to see you," Tom said, looking at my uniform with confusion. "What are you doing here?" "Keeping busy, Tom. You know how it is." "Yeah. Well, be careful around here," Tom lowered his voice. "We're hearing rumors about Apex, the smart city proposal. They're cutting corners, ignoring regulations. Your son is leading the charge, right?" I nodded, my stomach tightening. "Keep your head down, Arthur," Tom warned. "If this thing goes south, it's going to be messy." The pieces were starting to fit together. Kevin's desperation, his anxiety, his need for money. He was playing a dangerous game, and he was using the company's future as collateral. One afternoon, I saw him struggling with the presentation again, frustrated, snapping at his team. I recognized the data on the screen, the infrastructure maps, the zoning regulations. They were still wrong. I paused at the door of his office, a flicker of hope. Maybe I could help him. Maybe I could save him from himself. "Kevin," I said softly. He looked up, annoyed, his expression darkening when he saw me. "What is it?" "I'm busy. We're on a deadline. I noticed you're working on the smart city proposal." I pointed to the screen. "The maps you're using are outdated. If you factor in the existing fiber optic conduits on the east side, the ones laid down in the late 90s, you might find a more efficient route." I knew those conduits. I knew where they were buried. It would save millions in unnecessary construction, streamline the entire implementation. Kevin stared at me, as if I had grown a second head. His expression shifted from annoyance to disbelief, then to contempt. He laughed, a harsh, dismissive sound. "Dad, what on earth are you talking about? This is high-level strategy, not dusty old city planning. This is the future, not the past." He stood up, walking toward me, forcing me back into the hallway. "Go back to the mailroom. I don't need advice from someone whose idea of technology is a fax machine. Leave the real work to the professionals." He turned back to his screen, dismissing me entirely. The door closed firmly in my face. The rejection absolute. The irony was almost too much to bear. The conduits he was ignoring, the ones that could save the project, the ones that could secure his success. They were the ones I had personally approved and mapped years ago. I held the keys to his kingdom, and he didn't even know it. About 2 weeks later, the moment came, the twist that changed everything. I was asked to deliver a sensitive package to the very top floor, the domain of the CEO, Robert Bennett. I rarely went up there. It was a rarefied atmosphere. The silence was profound. The art on the walls, expensive, intimidating. The view of the city was breathtaking, a panorama of the world I used to shape. I waited in the reception area. The CEO's assistant, a polished woman named Eleanor Vance, checked the package. She had sharp eyes and an air of quiet authority. She looked at me, a flicker of curiosity in her gaze, as if trying to place me. I looked around the room, the elegance, the understated power, and then I saw it, on a side table, nestled among glossy architectural magazines and industry awards, a small, framed photograph. Old, the colors faded, the style unmistakably from the early 90s. I walked closer. My heart began to pound, a strange, heavy rhythm against my ribs. The air in the room suddenly felt thin, difficult to breathe. The photograph showed 2 young men, standing on a patch of muddy, uneven ground, holding a rolled-up blueprint between them. One man was tall and charismatic, a shock of dark hair, an infectious grin. That was Robert Bennett, the CEO of Apex Innovations. The other man was slimmer, more serious, wearing glasses, pointing to something on the blueprint, a look of intense concentration on his face. That man was me. The memories came flooding back, sharp and vivid, cutting through the fog of the past 30 years. It was 1992. Robert was a young, ambitious entrepreneur, a dream of building a revolutionary tech company. He had the vision, the drive, the charisma, but he had no money and no location. He came to the city planning department. Desperate, his dream on the verge of collapse. He needed a specific plot of land, rezoned, a derelict industrial site on the waterfront. Everyone else thought it was worthless, contaminated, impossible to develop. The red tape was insurmountable. I saw the potential, I saw his vision, I saw the future he wanted to build. I spent months navigating the bureaucracy, fighting the city council, calling in favors, bending the rules without breaking them. I secured the zoning permits, I drafted the initial site plans, ensuring the infrastructure could support his ambitious goals. I made the impossible possible. When it came time to pay me for my consultancy work, Robert was broke. The initial investment capital hadn't come through. He was devastated, apologizing profusely, promising to pay me double when the money arrived. He offered me a choice, a delayed payment or a stake in the fledgling company. A silent partnership, a gamble on a dream. I took the stake. I believed in him. I believed in the vision. Over the years, as Apex grew from a startup into a global powerhouse, I stayed in the background. I never wanted the limelight. I was happy with my job, happy with my quiet life with Mary. Robert would send me updates, annual reports. The dividends were small at first, then grew significantly. That money had paid off my mortgage, put Kevin through college, supplemented my pension. It was the safety net I had always relied on. I had never told Kevin. I wanted him to make his own way, to earn his success, without the burden of expectation, without relying on my hidden investment. I wanted him to build his own character, his own legacy. Looking back now, watching the man he had become, perhaps that was my biggest mistake. Perhaps by trying to protect him from the weight of wealth, I had inadvertently created a man who valued nothing else. I stared at the photo, the physical proof of a life Kevin knew nothing about. I was not just a burden. I was not just another mouth to feed. I was the foundation this entire building stood upon. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I had power. I had agency. I was not the victim of my circumstances. I was the architect of my destiny. And it was time to redraw the blueprints. If this story has kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe. It helps our channel grow and bring more stories to light. A few days later, Robert Bennett himself walked past the mailroom, a rare event. He rarely ventured into the basement. He was walking briskly, surrounded by executives, deep in conversation. He glanced inside as he passed. His eyes sweeping over the chaotic room, he stopped. He looked directly at me. I was sorting envelopes, my uniform slightly stained with ink. I saw the recognition flicker in his eyes, followed by confusion. A double take. He knew me, but he couldn't place me in this context. In this uniform, in this basement. I met his gaze. A silent acknowledgement passing between us. He hesitated, a question forming on his lips, then continued walking, the moment passing as quickly as it had arrived. But I knew he remembered. The seed was planted. The tension in the office continued to rise. The annual board meeting was approaching. The smart city proposal was the centerpiece. Kevin was desperate for a promotion, desperate to prove his worth. He was working late, drinking too much coffee. His temper shorter than ever, he was fraying at the edges. He found me looking at the directory in the lobby one afternoon during my break. I was studying the layout of the building, reconnecting with the blueprints in my head, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. "What are you doing now?" he demanded, his voice sharp with suspicion. His eyes narrowed. "Just checking the new tenant list," I said calmly, folding the map I had sketched. "Why? Are you snooping?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I heard you were asking questions about the company's history, about the building's architecture. I was just curious, Kevin. It's a fascinating structure. Curiosity is not in your job description, Dad." He pointed a finger at my chest. "I'm warning you. If I hear you're causing trouble, If you interfere with my work in any way, I'll have security watch you. I won't let you jeopardize my promotion. I mean it." The threat hung in the air, stark and ugly, my own son threatening me with security. The depth of his paranoia, his insecurity, was staggering. He was so focused on the illusion of power that he couldn't see the reality crumbling around him. He had no idea how much trouble he was already in. That evening, I was pushing my cart past the cafeteria, the smell of burnt popcorn filling the air. I heard Kevin's voice, loud, boasting. He was sitting with a group of junior executives, including Mark from the mailroom, basking in their attention. He was telling the story of how he handled me. So I told him, "We don't need another mouth to feed," Kevin was saying, smirking, mimicking my voice, a cruel caricature of the man I used to be. You should have seen his face. He was useless, just sitting around the house all day, collecting dust. The others laughed, a cruel, sycophantic sound that pierced my heart. "You actually made him get a job here?" Mark asked, disbelief and admiration in his voice.
"Yeah."
"Basement level." Kevin leaned back in his chair, savoring the moment. "It handles the financial burden and keeps him out of my hair. Sometimes you just have to be ruthless. You know, it's a tough world. Sentimentality is a weakness." "Ruthless. Sentimentality is a weakness." I pushed my cart away, my hands shaking, my vision blurring with unshed tears. I had raised a son who saw compassion as weakness, cruelty as strength. I had failed him. I had failed Mary. And now I had to face the devastating consequences of that failure. The time for observation was over. The time for action had arrived. I knew what I had to do. The day of the annual board meeting arrived. The building hummed with nervous energy, the air thick with anticipation and fear. The top floor was locked down, executives and board members only. Kevin was presenting the Smart City proposal, the one I knew was deeply flawed, the one built on stolen ideas and ignored regulations. He was dressed in a new, expensive suit, his hair slicked back, his expression a mixture of arrogance and anxiety. I saw him getting into the elevator, his face pale, his hands adjusting his tie nervously. He didn't see me. I was in the mailroom, sorting the afternoon delivery. The routine movements calming my frayed nerves, preparing myself for what was to come. The unavoidable reckoning. Suddenly, Mike, the supervisor, rushed over to me, his face pale with stress. "Arthur, I need you to run this upstairs," he said, handing me a sleek, black portfolio, embossed with the company logo. "It's a last-minute addition for the CEO. It has to go directly to him, in the boardroom. Now, authorization code is attached." My blood ran cold. This was it. The moment I had both dreaded and waited for. The convergence of past and present. The collision of two worlds. "Are you sure I should go?" I asked, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "It's authorized by the CEO himself. Go, now." I took the portfolio. It felt heavy, weighted with the burden of the truth. I rode the elevator up to the top floor. The silence in the elevator was deafening, the ascent feeling like a journey towards an unavoidable destiny. I walked down the plush hallway toward the main boardroom. I could hear the muffled sound of Kevin's voice through the heavy oak doors, the confident cadence of his presentation, the illusion of control. I nodded to the security guard. He checked my ID, the authorization code. He opened the door for me. The boardroom was massive, dominated by a long, polished mahogany table. About 20 people. The board of directors, the titans of industry, sat around it, their faces grim and expectant. Eleanor Vance, the assistant I had met earlier, was sitting near the head of the table. She wasn't just an assistant, she was a senior board member. She looked at me, recognition dawning in her eyes. Robert Bennett sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Kevin stood at the other end, next to a large screen displaying his flawed proposal, his voice ringing with false confidence. He froze when he saw me, his eyes widened, his face draining of color. He thought I was there to humiliate him, to sabotage his presentation. A final act of defiance from the old man in the mailroom. "Dad, what are you doing here?" he stammered. his voice cracking, the mask of confidence slipping away, revealing the terrified little boy beneath. The entire room turned to look at me. This old man in a gray uniform, an intrusion into their world of power and privilege. I ignored Kevin. I walked directly toward Robert Bennett, my steps steady, my gaze unwavering. Robert was looking at me, his eyes narrowed, the confusion clearing, the recognition finally settling in. He stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the marble floor, the sound echoing in the silent room. "Excuse me, gentlemen," Robert said to the board, his voice calm but commanding. He looked at me, arousation dawning on his face, the context clicking into place, the memory of the young man with the blueprints merging with the old man in the uniform. "Arthur? Arthur Thompson? Is that really you?" His voice was filled with disbelief, and something else, a deep, resonant warmth, the echo of a decades-old friendship, a partnership built on trust and mutual respect. "Hello, Robert," I said, extending my hand, my voice clear and steady. "It's been a long time." Robert clasped my hand in both of his grip firm and reassuring. "Arthur, I saw you the other day, in the basement. I thought I must be mistaken. I couldn't believe it." "What are you doing here? And why are you wearing that?" He gestured to my uniform, his expression pained, angry. Kevin interrupted, his voice desperate, scrambling to regain control, to salvage the wreckage of his career. "Mr. Bennett, I apologize. This is my father. He works in the mailroom. He must be confused. He's retired. He gets disoriented sometimes. I'll have him removed immediately." He started to move toward me, his face a mask of fury and panic. But Robert stopped him with a sharp, decisive gesture. "Stay where you are, Kevin," Robert commanded, his voice suddenly cold, the warmth replaced by steel. He turned back to the board, his expression serious, the atmosphere in the room shifting dramatically. "Gentlemen, I need to pause this presentation to introduce you to someone very important," Robert announced, his voice ringing with authority. "This man is Arthur Thompson. Most of you won't recognize his name, but you should." He put his arm around my shoulder, a gesture of respect and camaraderie that spoke volumes. 30 years ago, Apex Innovations was nothing more than an idea, a dream. I had the vision, but I had no capital, and no location. The city was about to shut me down before I even started. He paused, looking around the room, making eye contact with every board member. Arthur Thompson was the city planner who saw the potential in that derelict industrial site we now call our headquarters. He moved mountains to get the zoning approved. It fought the bureaucracy. He drafted our first site plan. He made the impossible possible. Robert paused again, letting the weight of his words sink in, the board members looking at me with newfound respect, the confusion replaced by awe. And when I couldn't afford to pay him for his expertise, Arthur didn't walk away. He took a chance on a broke entrepreneur. He accepted a stake in the company instead of payment. He delivered the final revelation. Arthur Thompson is not just a former city planner. He is the silent co-founder of Apex Innovation. His initial investment, his expertise, his faith in my vision, are the reason we are all sitting in this room today. The room was dead silent. Every eye was on me. I looked at Kevin. His mouth was open, his eyes wide with shock and horror, the realization of his catastrophic misjudgment crashing down on him, the carefully constructed world he had built. The illusion of his superiority was crumbling around him, reduced to dust. Robert turned to Kevin, his expression shifting from warmth to absolute disgust. "So, your father," Robert said, his voice dripping with contempt. "The man who built this company, the man whose dividends likely funded your entire education, your expensive lifestyle, your down payment on your house. He was confused and needed a job in the mailroom." Kevin couldn't speak. He just shook his head weakly, his body trembling, the sweat visible on his forehead. "I heard rumors about your management style, Kevin," Robert continued, his voice ruthless, unforgiving. "I heard you were arrogant, that you were dismissive of your staff." He glanced at Eleanor Vance, who nodded slightly. "And I've reviewed this smart city proposal," Robert said, his voice hardening. It's deeply flawed. You ignored the existing infrastructure, the fiber optic conduits that could save us millions, because you were too arrogant to listen to advice. He picked up a folder from the table. And these designs, he said, holding up a printout, they belong to David Chen, a young architect you've been berating and exploiting. You didn't just betray your father, Kevin. You betrayed this company. You committed fraud. Kevin stumbled back as if he had been struck, his face crumbling, the arrogance dissolving into sheer terror. I was willing to give you a chance, Robert said, to mentor you, because I respected your father. But this... He looked at me, his eyes filled with regret and anger. Arthur, I am so sorry. I had no idea. It's not your fault, Robert, I said quietly. Kevin made his choices. Yes, he did, Robert agreed. He looked at Kevin, his gaze piercing, relentless. You told your father, Robert said, his voice rising in anger. A man who has forgotten more about integrity and hard work than you will ever know that you didn't need another mouth to feed. You humiliated him. You treated him like a servant. He delivered the final blow. Cold precision. The words echoing in the silent room. Kevin Thompson, you are fired. Effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building, and we will be reviewing your projects for further legal action. Kevin's knees buckled. He grabbed the edge of the table to stay upright. Mr. Bennett, please, you can't. My career, my family. Sykes. Your family? Robert said, his voice dripping with contempt. You should have thought about your family when you betrayed the man who gave you everything. Security guards appeared at the door, their presence a silent confirmation of his downfall. Kevin looked at me one last time, a desperate, pleading look in his eyes. The eyes of the little boy I used to know, the son I had lost. But I had nothing left to give him. I had tried to teach him humility, compassion, integrity. Now life had to teach him, the hard way. I watched as they led him away, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The silence in the room broken only by the sound of the heavy oak doors closing behind him. The sound of a future ending. The fallout was immediate, devastating. Kevin, disgraced and unemployed, found himself blacklisted. The news of what he had done, the betrayal of his own father, the co-founder of the company, spread like wildfire. Sarah was furious, not at Kevin's cruelty, but at the sudden loss of income, status. I received a scathing text message from her. You ruined everything. It read, I hope you're happy. Their large house, their expensive cars, their lavish lifestyle, evaporated within weeks. The marriage, built on the shallow foundation of ambition and greed, crumbled under the weight of the scandal. They were forced to sell Cyril. Sarah moved back with her parents, leaving Kevin alone in a small, dingy apartment on the other side of the city. I didn't see him often after that. He couldn't look me in the eye. The shame was too great, the gap between us too vast. But the pain in my heart remained, a constant ache, a reminder of my failure. I had gained my dignity back, but I had lost my son. A few days after the board meeting, Robert called me into his office. The photograph of us was now sitting prominently on his desk. Arthur, he said, pouring me a cup of coffee, the aroma rich and comforting. We fixed the smart city proposal. Thanks to your insights, and David Chen is now leading the project. The board approved it unanimously. He leaned back in his chair, looking at me with a mixture of respect and regret. But we need more than just a fixed proposal. We need experience. We need wisdom. We need someone who understands the soul of this city, the foundation we built this company on. He offered me a position, senior consultant on the board, a salary commensurate with my contribution, and the respect I deserved. I accepted. Not for the money, though it ensured I would never be a burden again. I accepted because I realized I wasn't done yet. I still had something to offer. I still had a legacy to protect. I moved out of Kevin's house, bought a small, comfortable condo downtown, near the waterfront, the place where it all began. I set up my model trains again, the rhythmic clicking of the wheels on the tracks filling the silence, a comforting reminder of the simple pleasures of life. Sometimes I stand at the window of the executive floor at Apex, looking out over the city, I helped build. The view is spectacular. The skyline, a testament to the power of vision and hard work. But the victory is bittersweet. Respect is not something you can demand or inherit. It must be earned, and sometimes the price of teaching that lesson is painfully high. I often wonder if Kevin will ever understand that true wealth isn't measured in dollars and cents, but in the bonds we nurture, the integrity we maintain, and the legacy of kindness we leave behind. I am Arthur Thompson. I built this company, and I am still waiting, hoping against hope, for my son to finally come home. Thanks for listening. Please rate our story in the comments. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe. Your support means a lot, because your time matters.